Philip Young's heart raced as Indus, the alluring Tellarite scientist, pressed her slender body against him. Her husband Kraz stood nearby, watching with a mix of resentment and curiosity. This wasn't how Philip had imagined his peacekeeping mission would unfold, but he knew it might be the key to securing humanity's future in the galaxy. The human soldier had arrived on Tellus just months ago, part of Earth's victorious forces in the aftermath of the interstellar war. His mission seemed straightforward: oversee the integration of human technology and customs into Tellarite society. But the complexities of alien diplomacy and unexpected desires had quickly complicated matters. Tellus, a world of towering crystal spires and swirling purple skies, had become a powder keg of tension between human peacekeepers and resentful Tellarite civilians. Many viewed the humans not as allies, but as conquerors, their presence a constant reminder of their recent defeat. Philip's first meeting with Indus had been purely professional. She'd been assigned to study human physiology, a task her husband Kraz had reluctantly approved due to its importance for the mission. But as they worked closely together, sharing knowledge and cultural insights, an undeniable attraction had blossomed. Indus was unlike any being Philip had encountered. Her iridescent skin shimmered in the alien sunlight, and her four eyes, each a different shade of gold, seemed to peer into his very soul. Her insatiable curiosity about humans matched his own fascination with her species. As their collaboration deepened, so did the threat to the fragile peace. Philip uncovered evidence of a growing resistance movement among the Tellarites, led by a charismatic figure determined to drive the humans from their world. This underground rebellion posed a significant risk to Earth's plans for galactic expansion. Torn between her loyalty to her people and her deepening feelings for Philip, Indus made a fateful decision. She began providing him with crucial information about Tellarite biology and culture, knowledge that could give humans a strategic advantage in maintaining control. Kraz, ever watchful, grew increasingly suspicious of his wife's frequent meetings with the human soldier. His piercing gaze followed them as they worked, his mandibles clicking with barely contained agitation. As tensions rose and the resistance gained momentum, Philip realized that the fate of human-Tellarite relations might hinge on his connection with Indus. The information she provided was invaluable, but he sensed that a deeper bond might be necessary to truly bridge the gap between their species. Faced with this realization, Philip made a bold and potentially dangerous decision. He would pursue a more intimate relationship with Indus, despite the cultural taboos and ethical quandaries it presented. It was a risk that could either cement the alliance between humans and Tellarites or ignite a catastrophic conflict that would jeopardize humanity's future among the stars. As Philip pulled Indus closer, feeling the alien warmth of her body against his, he knew there was no turning back. With Kraz's eyes boring into them, the human soldier and the Tellarite scientist were about to cross a line that would change the course of interstellar history. The fate of two species now rested in their hands, and in the depths of their forbidden desire. As Philip's lips met Indus's, a jolt of electricity passed between them. The intimacy of the moment was palpable, charged with the weight of their actions and the watchful gaze of Kraz. But even as Philip savored the alien warmth of Indus's embrace, his mind raced with the implications of this liaison. In the days that followed, Philip threw himself into his intelligence-gathering efforts with renewed vigor. He and Indus spent long hours in her laboratory, ostensibly collaborating on xenobiological research. Their conversations, once purely professional, now flowed with an easy familiarity that belied the growing tension beyond the lab's walls. "The protein synthesis in human cells is fascinating," Indus mused one afternoon, her four golden eyes fixed on a holographic display. "It's so similar to ours, yet subtly different." Philip leaned in, his shoulder brushing against hers. "That similarity could be the key to something groundbreaking. What if we could use it to develop treatments that work across species?" Indus's iridescent skin shimmered with excitement. "A universal medical approach? That's revolutionary." As they delved deeper into their research, Philip carefully steered their conversations toward Tellarite society and culture. Indus, her natural curiosity piqued, shared insights that proved invaluable to his mission. She spoke of ancient traditions, complex social hierarchies, and the deep-seated pride that ran through her people. Many Tellarites see the human presence as an affront to our sovereignty, she confided one evening, her voice low. They don't understand that cooperation could benefit both our species. Philip nodded, filing away this information. That's why our work is so important. If we can show tangible benefits of our alliance, it might change minds. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. While examining the interaction between human and Tellarite cellular structures, they discovered a method to temporarily alter human physiology. The implications were staggering. Humans could potentially adapt to the Tellarite environment without protective gear. As news of their discovery spread, Philip noticed a shift in the atmosphere on Tellus. Human officials were elated, seeing it as a crucial step towards long-term colonization. But among the Tellarites, murmurs of discontent grew louder. Kraz's behavior became increasingly erratic. His mandibles clicked incessantly whenever he saw Philip and Indus together, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. One evening, Philip overheard a heated argument between Kraz and Indus in their quarters. "You spend more time with that human than with your own people?" Kraz's voice boomed. "Have you forgotten your duty to Tellus?" Indus's reply was firm but measured. "My work with Philip benefits all Tellarites. I won't abandon it because of your jealousy." The argument drew curious glances from passers-by, including a tall, imposing Tellarite that Philip had never seen before. The stranger's eyes lingered on Kraz, a look of calculated interest on his face. Days later, Philip proposed a public demonstration of their new technology to the human command. "It's our best chance to ease Tellarite fears," he argued. "I'll volunteer to be the first test subject. Show them we're committed to peaceful coexistence." The command agreed, seeing the potential to turn the tide of public opinion. As preparations began, Philip threw himself into the work, determined to make the demonstration a success. But a shadow of worry gnawed at him. The resistance movement had been quiet lately, too quiet. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and Philip couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. His suspicions were confirmed when Indus approached him one evening, her usually confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "Philip, I need to tell you something," she whispered, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "It's about Kraz. I think he might be involved with the resistance." Philip's heart sank. He had suspected as much, but hearing it from Indus made it real. "What makes you think that?" "He's been acting strange, sneaking out at odd hours. And I've seen him talking to a Tellarite I don't recognize, a large male with a scar across his left mandible." The description matched the stranger Philip had seen during Kraz and Indus's argument. He filed away the information, his mind already racing with potential contingencies. "Indus, listen to me," Philip said, taking her hands in his. "We need to proceed carefully. The demonstration is our best chance to bridge the gap between our peoples. But if the resistance is planning something—" Indus nodded, her golden eyes filled with grit. "I understand. What do you need me to do?" As they huddled together, formulating plans and backup strategies, Philip felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The fate of human Tellarite relations hung in the balance, and he was at the center of it all. The day of the demonstration dawned, Tellus's purple sky streaked with ribbons of gold. As Philip donned the prototype device that would alter his physiology, he cast a wary eye over the gathered crowd. Tellarites and humans stood in uneasy proximity, the air thick with anticipation and underlying tension. Indus stood nearby, her eyes meeting his with a mix of pride and concern. Kraz lurked at the edges of the crowd, his gaze darting between Philip and a group of Tellarites clustered near the back. Taking a deep breath, Philip stepped onto the platform. As he prepared to activate the device, he scanned the crowd one last time. His eyes locked onto a tall Tellarite with a scarred mandible. The resistance leader, he was certain of it. In that moment, Philip knew that whatever happened next would change the course of history on Tellus. With steady hands, he reached for the activation switch, ready to take the plunge into the unknown. As Philip's finger hovered over the activation switch, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. The air crackled with anticipation, the gathered Tellarites and humans alike holding their breath. With a decisive motion, Philip pressed the button. A soft hum emanated from the device, and Philip felt a tingling sensation spread through his body. His skin prickled, and he inhaled sharply as his lungs adjusted to the Tellarite atmosphere. The crowd watched in awe as his complexion shifted, taking on a faint iridescent sheen reminiscent of Tellarite skin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Philip announced, his voice steady despite the strange sensations coursing through him. "As you can see, the physiological adaptation is underway. I am now breathing the Tellarite atmosphere without any external assistance." A murmur rippled through the audience. Philip caught sight of Indus, her golden eyes wide with a mix of pride and concern. He offered her a reassuring smile, then turned his attention back to the crowd. As he began to explain the intricacies of the adaptation process, Indus's keen eyes noticed a subtle shift in the crowd. Several Tellarites were moving into strategic positions, their movements too coordinated to be coincidental. With a start, she recognized some of them as associates of Kraz. Alarm bells rang in Indus's mind. She glanced at her husband, who stood at the edge of the gathering, his mandibles clicking nervously. The pieces fell into place, and she realized with growing horror what was about to unfold. Without hesitation, Indus pushed her way through the crowd towards Philip. "Philip!" she called out, her voice urgent. "We need to—" Her warning was cut short by a sudden commotion. A tall Tellarite with a scarred mandible, the one Philip had identified as the resistance leader, raised his arm and shouted, "Now!" Chaos erupted. Resistance fighters surged forward, brandishing weapons and targeting the human peacekeepers. The crowd scattered in panic, screams filling the air as the attackers advanced on the demonstration platform. Philip, still adjusting to his altered physiology, felt a surge of adrenaline course through him. His newly enhanced senses sharpened, the world around him coming into crisp focus. As a group of resistance fighters rushed towards him, Philip reacted with surprising speed and agility. He leapt from the platform, landing with a grace that belied his human origins. In a fluid motion, he pulled Indus close, shielding her with his body as a barrage of energy blasts scorched the air around them. "Stay close," Philip murmured, his enhanced strength evident as he effortlessly maneuvered them behind a fallen piece of equipment. Indus nodded, her four eyes darting around the chaotic scene. "Philip, I think Kraz is involved in this. I recognize some of the attackers as his associates." A look of understanding passed between them, tinged with the weight of betrayal. There was no time to dwell on it, however, as another wave of attackers approached their position. Philip's body moved with newfound power and precision. He disarmed one attacker with a swift strike, using the captured weapon to stun two more. Indus watched in amazement as he fought off multiple Tellarites, his movements fluid and decisive. Across the battlefield, Kraz stood frozen, his eyes locked on the sight of his wife in the protective embrace of the human soldier. The jealousy that had driven him to conspire with the resistance melted away, replaced by a sickening realization of what he had set in motion. With a shaky voice, Kraz activated his communicator. "This is Kraz. We need security forces at the demonstration site immediately. Code Red." As Tellarite security began to arrive, augmenting the human peacekeepers, the tide of the battle slowly turned. Philip and Indus found themselves pushed towards a corner, surrounded by a group of resistance fighters led by the scarred Tellarite himself. "Well, well," the resistance leader sneered, his voice carrying over the din of the fight. "The human champion and his Tellarite collaborator? How fitting." Philip positioned himself protectively in front of Indus. "We don't have to do this. There's still a chance for peace." The leader, Zorn, let out a harsh laugh. "Peace? With the conquerors of our world? I think not." He turned his gaze to Indus. "And you, traitor, did you know your own husband helped orchestrate this attack?" Indus flinched at the revelation, but her voice remained steady. "If that's true, then Kraz has betrayed not just me, but all of Tellus. Our future lies in cooperation, not conflict." Zorn's face contorted with rage. He raised his weapon, aiming it squarely at Philip's chest. "Let's see how adaptable you really are, human." In that moment, Philip's enhanced reflexes kicked into overdrive. He moved with blinding speed, closing the distance between himself and Zorn before the Tellarite could react. With a precise strike, Philip disarmed the resistance leader, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. The surrounding fighters, momentarily stunned by the display, hesitated. Philip seized the opportunity, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Look around you. Is this the future you want for Tellus? Endless conflict and destruction? Or can you imagine a world where our strengths are combined, where we learn from each other and grow together?" A hush fell over the group. Even Zorn, disarmed and defeated, seemed to deflate slightly. The fight around them was dying down as more security forces arrived, but all eyes were on Philip and Indus. In that moment of quiet, Indus stepped forward, her hand finding Philip's. The gesture, small but significant, spoke volumes to the watching Tellarites. Here was one of their own, standing united with a human, offering a vision of a shared future. As the last of the resistance fighters were subdued, the true impact of the day's events began to sink in. The demonstration, though interrupted, had showcased something far more powerful than any technology. It had shown the potential for human adaptability, strength, and most importantly, their willingness to stand alongside Tellarite allies. In the aftermath, as medical teams tended to the injured and security forces secured the area, Philip and Indus found themselves at the center of a storm of attention. Human military officials praised Philip's quick thinking and bravery, while many Tellarites looked at Indus with a newfound respect. Amidst the chaos, Philip and Indus shared a quiet moment. "Are you all right?" Philip asked, his concern evident in his voice. Indus nodded, her golden eyes meeting his. "Yes, thanks to you. But Philip, what happens now? With Kraz, with us, with everything?" Philip's expression was solemn as he surveyed the scene around them. "I don't know, Indus, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As news of the attack and its outcome spread across Tellus, both human and Tellarite societies began to buzz with debate. The lines between allies and enemies, between progress and tradition, had been blurred. And at the heart of it all stood Philip and Indus, their unlikely bond a symbol of the complex future that lay ahead for both their peoples. As the dust settled on the chaotic events of the demonstration, Philip found himself thrust into a new role that would test his diplomatic skills like never before. The human military command, impressed by his quick thinking and adaptability during the attack, promoted him to a key position in interspecies relations. "We need someone who understands both sides," General Hawthorne explained during the briefing. "Someone who can bridge the gap between humans and Tellarites. You've proven yourself more than capable, Philip." Philip nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "What exactly do you have in mind, sir?" "Cultural exchange events," the general replied. "A series of them, showcasing the best of human culture and technology. We need to change hearts and minds, show the Tellarites we're more than just conquerors." Over the next few weeks, Philip threw himself into organizing the events. He curated collections of human art, arranged for musical performances, and even set up culinary demonstrations to introduce Tellarites to Earth cuisine. During one planning session, Philip found himself working late into the night. A gentle knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out, looking up from his datapad. Indus stepped into the room, her golden eyes reflecting the soft light. "I thought you might still be here," she said, a hint of concern in her voice. "You've been working non-stop." Philip offered a tired smile. "There's so much to do, but I'm glad you're here. I wanted to ask you something." Indus tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. "Oh?" "Would you consider participating in one of the events?" Philip asked. "As a representative of Tellarite science, I thought we could showcase our collaborative work on the adaptation device." Indus's eyes lit up. "I'd be honored," she replied, her mandibles clicking with excitement. "It would be a perfect opportunity to demonstrate what we can achieve together." As they began to discuss the details, Philip couldn't help but notice the way Indus's eyes lingered on him, or how her hand occasionally brushed against his as they pored over plans. The attraction that had been simmering between them since their first meeting seemed to intensify with each passing moment. Meanwhile, across the city, Kraz paced in his living quarters, consumed by guilt and regret. The sight of Indus in Philip's protective embrace during the attack had shaken him to his core. He realized now how close he had come to losing everything he held dear. With a determined set to his mandibles, Kraz activated his communication device. "This is Kraz," he spoke into it. "I'd like to volunteer my services as a liaison between the Tellarite government and the human peacekeepers." The first cultural exchange event was held in a large open-air amphitheater. Tellarites of all ages gathered, their curiosity palpable as they watched humans demonstrate their physical abilities. Philip stood at the center of the arena, his adapted physiology on full display. He lifted weights that would have been impossible for a Tellarite, his muscles rippling with effort. The crowd gasped and chittered in amazement. From her position near the front, Indus watched with rapt attention. She found herself mesmerized by Philip's strength and grace, her scientific interest mingling with a more personal fascination. As the event progressed, Kraz made his way through the crowd, speaking with both humans and Tellarites. He answered questions, smoothed over misunderstandings, and did his best to foster goodwill between the two species. However, not everyone was impressed by the display of human culture and ability. In the shadows of a nearby building, Zorn and a group of his most loyal followers watched with narrowed eyes. "Look at them," Zorn growled, his scarred mandible twitching with anger. "Parading around like they own our world, and our people lapping it up like obedient pets." One of his followers, a stocky Tellarite named Grell, leaned in close. "What are we going to do about it, boss?" Zorn's eyes glinted dangerously. "We're going to remind everyone why humans don't belong here. Prepare the weapons. We strike at the next event." As the weeks passed and more cultural exchanges took place, Philip noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Tellarites who had once regarded humans with suspicion now approached them with curiosity. Conversations in the streets were more animated, less guarded. One evening, as Philip and Indus worked late preparing for the next event, she suddenly set down her data pad and turned to face him. "Philip," she began, her voice hesitant, "there's something I need to talk to you about." Philip looked up, concern etching his features. "What is it, Indus?" She took a deep breath. "I've been struggling with something. My feelings for you, they've grown beyond what I expected. But I'm still married to Kraz, and I care for him too. I don't know what to do." Philip felt his heart race, a mix of elation and anxiety coursing through him. Before he could respond, Indus continued. "I spoke with my friend Vega about it. She suggested something unconventional. In some Tellarite cultures, there's a tradition of polyamorous relationships. I know it's not common in human culture, but..." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Philip opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden commotion outside interrupted them. Alarms blared as security forces rushed past the window. Philip and Indus exchanged a look of alarm before rushing to see what was happening. Outside, chaos reigned. Zorn and his followers had launched their attack, using stolen military-grade weapons to target both humans and Tellarite supporters. The night sky lit up with energy blasts and explosions. Philip's training kicked in immediately. He began coordinating with the human peacekeepers and loyal Tellarite security forces, his enhanced physiology allowing him to move swiftly through the panicked crowd. "Indus," he called out, "can you disable their weapons?" Indus nodded, her scientific mind already racing. "I'll need to get closer to their main power source. Cover me!" As they worked together to repel the attack, Kraz found himself caught in the crossfire. He watched in awe as Philip risked his life to save both humans and Tellarites, including Indus. The sight stirred something in him, challenging his long-held beliefs about humans. In a moment of clarity, Kraz realized that the path forward might require rethinking everything he thought he knew about relationships, both personal and interspecies. As the battle raged on, he began to formulate an idea that could change everything. The course of both human and Tellarite society forever. As the chaos subsided, Philip, Indus, and Kraz found themselves drawn together by the shared experience of survival and the weight of their newfound responsibilities. The following days were a whirlwind of debriefings, medical checkups, and strategic meetings. Yet amidst the flurry of activity, they managed to carve out moments of privacy to discuss the revelation that had been interrupted by Zorn's attack. In Philip's quarters, the trio sat in a tense circle, the air heavy with unspoken emotions and cultural taboos. Kraz, his mandibles twitching nervously, broke the silence. "I know this is unconventional," he began, his voice low and gravelly. "But after witnessing your bravery, Philip, and seeing the connection you share with Indus, I've come to realize that our traditional ways may not be sufficient for this new era." Indus reached out, placing a hand on Kraz's arm. "What exactly are you proposing, Kraz?" Kraz took a deep breath. "A union, the three of us. It's not unheard of in some of our older traditions, though it's fallen out of practice. But perhaps in bridging our two species, we need to look to the past to forge a path to the future." Philip leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You're talking about a polyamorous relationship between all of us?" Kraz nodded, his eyes darting between Philip and Indus. "It would be a powerful symbol of unity between our peoples. And I believe it could bring us personal fulfillment as well." The conversation stretched long into the night, filled with questions, concerns, and cautious hope. By the time the twin moons of Tellus had set, they had agreed to explore this new arrangement, taking it one day at a time. Word of their unconventional relationship spread quickly through both human and Tellarite circles. It wasn't long before Philip was summoned to a meeting with General Hawthorne and the Tellarite High Council. "We believe your unique situation could be of great diplomatic value," Hawthorne explained, his expression a mix of discomfort and persistence. "We'd like you, Indus and Kraz, to become the faces of a new interspecies cultural exchange program." The Tellarite counselor, Grev, nodded in agreement. "Your union represents the potential for deep connections between our peoples. It could be the key to lasting peace and cooperation." Philip felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He glanced at Indus and Kraz, who stood beside him, and saw the same mix of apprehension and commitment in their eyes. "We'll do it," Philip said, speaking for all of them, "for the sake of both our peoples." The following weeks were a blur of activity as they threw themselves into organizing a grand celebration of human and Tellarite unity. Philip and Indus worked tirelessly on a joint scientific project, developing a new type of environmental suit that would allow humans to explore Tellus's harsh terrains without relying on the adaptation device. In their shared lab, surrounded by holographic displays and prototype materials, Philip and Indus found their bond deepening. Their hands would brush as they reached for tools, their eyes meeting over complex equations. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension and growing affection. Meanwhile, Kraz took on the role of cultural liaison with gusto. He organized workshops and seminars, explaining the intricacies of Tellarite customs to human participants. Through these interactions, Kraz found his own perspective shifting. He began to see the value in human adaptability and innovation, qualities he had once dismissed as reckless. As the day of the celebration approached, Philip's military instincts kicked into high gear. He worked closely with Tellarite security forces, training a joint human-Tellarite team to handle potential threats. "Remember," Philip instructed during a training session, "we're stronger together. Human reflexes combined with Tellarite strength make for an unbeatable combination." The celebration dawned bright and clear, the air buzzing with excitement and nervous energy. Crowds of humans and Tellarites mingled in the sprawling event grounds, marveling at displays of art, technology, and physical prowess from both worlds. Philip, Indus, and Kraz stood backstage, preparing for their appearance. The sound of the crowd filtered through, a mix of human voices and Tellarite clicks and whistles. "Are we ready for this?" Indus asked, her golden eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. Kraz placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We have to be, for all of us." Philip nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. "Together, then." As they stepped out onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. But before Philip could speak, a series of explosions rocked the event grounds. Screams and shouts erupted as Zorn and his followers launched their attack. Philip's training kicked in instantly. "Indus, Kraz, get to safety. I'll coordinate the defense." But Indus was already moving, her scientific mind racing. "I can modify the holo displays into defensive systems. Cover me." Kraz, surprising them both, stood his ground. I'll use my connections to rally support. We'll face this together. As chaos erupted around them, the trio split up, each playing to their strengths. Philip led the joint security team, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to anticipate and counter the attackers' moves. Indus worked feverishly, transforming celebration technology into makeshift shields and disruptors. Kraz's voice rang out over the commotion, directing civilians to safety and coordinating with Tellarite authorities. The battle raged across the event grounds, a brutal dance of energy weapons and hand-to-hand combat. Through it all, Philip, Indus, and Kraz found themselves drawing closer together, their actions becoming more synchronized, more harmonious. As they fought their way through the chaos, they suddenly found themselves face-to-face with Zorn himself. The scarred Tellarite's eyes blazed with hatred as he raised his weapon. "This ends now," Zorn snarled. "Your unnatural union will not corrupt our people." Philip tensed, ready to spring into action. But before he could move, Indus stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Look around you, Zorn," she said, gesturing to the humans and Tellarites, fighting side by side against the attackers. "This is the future. Not division, but unity. Not hatred, but understanding." Kraz moved to stand beside her, his voice joining hers. "We are stronger together, Zorn. Can't you see that?" For a moment, Zorn's dedication seemed to waver. In that instant of hesitation, Philip acted. With lightning speed, he disarmed Zorn, pinning the Tellarite rebel to the ground. As Zorn was led away by security forces, the sounds of battle began to fade. Humans and Tellarites emerged from hiding places, looking around in wonder at the scene of cooperation and shared victory. Philip, Indus, and Kraz stood at the center of it all, their hands clasped together in a symbol of their unique bond. As the dust settled and the true impact of the day's events began to sink in, they knew that their journey was a long way to go. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with cultural misunderstandings, personal doubts, and external pressures. But as they looked at each other, their eyes shining with shared purpose and growing affection, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Their unconventional union had become more than a diplomatic tool. It was now the beating heart of a new era of human-Tellarite relations, a living example of the power of connection across the stars. Stars of a new era of human-Tellarite relations, a living example of the power of connection across the boundaries of species and culture. In the days following the thwarted attack, Philip, Indus, and Kraz found themselves thrust into an unexpected spotlight. News of their unconventional relationship and heroic actions spread rapidly across both human and Tellarite networks, sparking intense curiosity and debate. Philip's comm unit buzzed incessantly with incoming messages. He glanced at the screen, his eyebrows rising as he saw the sender. "It's from General Hawthorne," he announced to Indus and Kraz, who were reviewing damage reports from the celebration grounds. Indus looked up, her golden eyes widening. "What does it say?" Philip's eyes scanned the message quickly. "They want us to go on a tour, a planet-wide tour to promote interspecies cooperation." Kraz's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "It seems our superiors see diplomatic value in our arrangement." The trio exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and apprehension passing between them. They had little time to process the request before they were whisked away to begin their journey. Their first stop was Gornak, one of Tellus's largest cities. As they stepped onto the stage of a vast amphitheater, Philip felt a surge of nervous energy. The crowd before them was a sea of Tellarite faces, their eyes fixed on the unlikely trio. Indus stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the audience. "Today, we present a symbol of what our species can achieve together." She gestured to Philip, who was wearing the new environmental suit they had developed. Philip activated the suit, feeling it hum to life around him. He strode to the edge of the stage, where a simulated harsh Tellarite environment had been set up. Without hesitation, he stepped into the swirling, acidic mists. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as Philip navigated the treacherous terrain with ease. He could hear Indus's voice explaining the technology, but his focus was on demonstrating its capabilities. As he emerged from the simulation unscathed, a ripple of impressed murmurs spread through the audience. The tour continued, taking them from city to city. At each stop, Philip found himself subjected to increasingly challenging physical trials. In Krasnok, he competed against Tellarite athletes in feats of strength and endurance. Despite the punishing gravity and corrosive atmosphere, Philip's enhanced physiology allowed him to hold his own, earning grudging respect from even the most skeptical Tellarites. Indus threw herself into her role with enthusiasm. In Vextor, she led a symposium on cross-species genetics, her eyes alight with passion as she explained the potential for groundbreaking medical advancements. Imagine, she said, her hands moving animatedly, treatments that combine the resilience of Tellarite physiology with the adaptability of human biology. We stand on the brink of a medical revolution. Kraz, for his part, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He arranged meetings between human diplomats and Tellarite leaders, smoothing over cultural misunderstandings and fostering dialogue. In one such meeting, Philip watched as Kraz deftly navigated a tense negotiation over resource sharing. "Consider," Kraz said, his voice low and persuasive, "how human ingenuity combined with Tellarite resources could transform our mining operations. We need not compete when we can collaborate." As the tour progressed, Philip began to sense a shift in the atmosphere. Where once they had been met with suspicion and hostility, now there was growing curiosity and even excitement. However, this change did not go unchallenged. In Zorvak, they encountered their first organized protest. As Philip prepared to demonstrate the environmental suit, a group of Tellarites burst into the venue, waving signs and chanting slogans. "Humans go home," they shouted. "Protect Tellarite purity." At the head of the group stood a tall, imposing Tellarite with piercing black eyes. This, Philip realized, must be Vex, the leader of the growing resistance movement. Vex stepped forward, his voice ringing out over the chaos. "Look at what we're becoming," he cried, gesturing towards Philip, Indus, and Kraz. "Is this the future you want? A Tellus where we abandon our traditions, our very identity, to become more like them?" The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered Vex's words, while others shouted him down. Philip felt a hand on his arm and turned to see Indus, her expression determined. "We need to respond," she said firmly. "Not with anger, but with understanding." Kraz nodded, stepping up to the microphone. "My fellow Tellarites," he began, his voice calm but powerful. "Change is not easy. It challenges us, forces us to question what we know. But I ask you this. Is our culture so fragile that it cannot withstand new ideas? Are we not strong enough to grow, to evolve, without losing who we are?" His words seemed to resonate with many in the crowd. The tension in the room began to dissipate, but Philip could see that Vex and his followers were far from convinced. As they left the venue under heavy security, Philip's comm unit buzzed with an urgent message. His blood ran cold as he read its contents. "We have a problem," he said, turning to Indus and Kraz. "Intelligence reports indicate a planned attack on the joint research facility in Kral Nox, the one working on the new terraforming technology." Indus gasped. "But that's the crown jewel of our collaborative efforts. If it's destroyed, then everything we've worked for could be undone," Kraz finished grimly. Philip's mind raced, already formulating a defense strategy. "We need to get there immediately. Indus, can you contact the facility and start implementing security protocols? Kraz, we'll need your political connections to gather support from moderate factions." As they boarded their transport, Philip couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. The fate of human Tellarite relations hung in the balance, and the true test of their unconventional union was yet to come. The transport sped towards Kralnox, cutting through the turbulent Tellarite atmosphere. Inside, Philip, Indus, and Kraz worked feverishly, preparing for the battle that lay ahead. Little did they know that the coming conflict would challenge not only their diplomatic mission, but the very foundation of their relationship. Personal bonds. The transport touched down near the Kralnox research facility with a jarring thud. Philip, Indus, and Kraz rushed out, their senses immediately assaulted by the chaos unfolding before them. Smoke billowed from several breached sections of the complex, and the air crackled with weapons fire. Philip's tactical mind kicked into high gear. "Indus, get to the main lab and secure the data. Kraz, rally any friendly forces you can find. I'll coordinate our defense." As they split up, Indus sprinted toward the central building, her heart's pounding. She weaved through panicked researchers and toppled equipment, her mind racing with calculations and contingencies. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the facility. The shockwave sent Indus flying, and she crashed hard against a wall. Through blurry vision, she saw Kraz stumble and fall, a piece of shrapnel embedded in his side. "Kraz!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet. She reached him just as his eyes began to flutter closed. Blood seeped from his wound, its acrid smell mixing with the smoke-filled air. Indus's scientific mind whirred into action. Her gaze fell on the prototype environmental suit they'd brought, now damaged but still functional. In a flash of inspiration, she began to modify it, her fingers flying over the controls. "Hold on, Kraz," she murmured, adjusting the suit's life support systems to Tellarite physiology. With practiced precision, she fitted the makeshift medical device onto Kraz, willing it to work. Outside, Philip led a counteroffensive against Vex's forces. He vaulted over a fallen pillar, his enhanced muscles propelling him further than any normal human could manage in Tellus's punishing gravity. Landing in a crouch, he fired off a series of precise shots, each finding its mark. "Form up," he shouted to the mixed human Tellarite security team. "Use the terrain to your advantage." The defenders rallied around Philip, their movements becoming more coordinated with each passing minute. They pushed back against the attackers, using the facility's unique architecture and Tellus's harsh environment to outmaneuver Vex's forces. As the battle raged, a sleek human ship cut through the turbulent skies. Commander Sarah Bryant stepped out, her eyes quickly assessing the situation. She barked orders to her team, deploying advanced weaponry and additional troops. "Philip," she called out, spotting him amid the fray. "What's your status?" Philip ducked behind cover, his breath coming in short gasps. "We're holding, but barely. Vex is after the central database." Bryant nodded grimly. "We'll handle the perimeter. Stop him at all cost." Inside the facility, Indus raced toward the central database. Her mind split between concern for Kraz and the urgent need to protect their research. She burst into the control room, only to find Vex already there, his fingers dancing across a console. "Step away, Vex," Indus demanded, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. Vex sneered, his black eyes glinting with malice. "You're too late, traitor. I'll erase every trace of this unholy collaboration." Indus's fingers flew across a nearby terminal, engaging in a digital duel with Vex. Lines of code flashed across the screen as she parried his attacks, exploiting her intimate knowledge of both human and Tellarite systems. "Our work will save lives, Vex," she said, never taking her eyes off the screen. "Human and Tellarite alike." Outside, Philip and Commander Bryant coordinated their forces, using the jagged terrain to their advantage. Human troops, guided by Tellarite allies, navigated treacherous ravines and toxic geysers, flanking Vex's forces. "Now!" Philip shouted, and a barrage of fire erupted from hidden positions, catching the attackers off guard. As the tide of battle turned, a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Philip? Indus? Can you hear me?" "Kraz," Indus gasped, her heart leaping. "You're awake." "Thanks to you," Kraz replied, his voice weak but determined. "Where are you?" "The central database," Indus answered, still locked in her digital battle with Vex. "Kraz, Vex is trying to destroy our research." There was a pause, then Kraz's voice came back. Stronger. "Get me on the facility's broadcast system. I need to address our people." Philip, overhearing the exchange, felt a surge of hope. "Do it, Indus. We'll get him there." Moments later, Kraz's voice boomed across the facility and the surrounding area. "My fellow Tellarites, hear me. I stand before you not as a politician, but as one of you. I've seen firsthand the power of cooperation with humans. Their technology saved my life today." As Kraz spoke, Philip and Indus made their way to him, supporting him between them. They entered the central atrium, presenting a united front to the gathered Tellarites and humans. "Look at us," Kraz continued, gesturing to Philip and Indus. "Human, Tellarite, and one who bridges both worlds. We are stronger together than we ever were apart. Vex would have you fear change, but I ask you to embrace it. The stars await us, but we can only reach them together. His words resonated through the facility, touching the hearts of Tellarites and humans alike. Many of Vex's followers lowered their weapons, doubt clouding their features. Vex, realizing his support was crumbling, snarled in frustration. He bolted from the control room, heading deeper into the facility. Philip's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of his footsteps. He's heading for the power core, Philip realized with a jolt of alarm. Indus's eyes widened in horror. If he destabilizes it, he'll destroy everything within kilometers. Kraz straightened, shrugging off the prototype suit. Then we stop him, together. The trio raced through the facility's winding corridors, their steps in perfect sync. They could hear the growing hum of the power core as they descended into the facility's depths. As they burst into the core chamber, they saw Vex hunched over a control panel, his fingers flying across the keys. Alarms blared, warning of imminent overload. Philip, Indus, and Kraz exchanged a silent look, a plan forming between them without a word spoken. They spread out, each approaching Vex from a different angle. "It's over, Vex," Philip called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Surrender now." Vex whirled around, his eyes wild with desperation. "Never! I'll see this abomination of a union destroyed, even if I have to destroy us all." As Vex reached for the final sequence to trigger a meltdown, Indus, Philip, and Kraz tensed, ready to make their move. The fate of the facility, their alliance, and perhaps the future of human-Tellarite relations hung in the balance as they prepared to confront Vex in this final, decisive moment. Vex's finger hovered over the final key, his face contorted with rage and desperation. In that split second, Philip, Indus, and Kraz sprang into action. Philip's enhanced muscles propelled him forward with incredible speed. He collided with Vex, knocking him away from the console. The two grappled, rolling across the floor in a blur of limbs. Indus darted to the control panel, her fingers flying across the keys. Alarms blared louder, the core's pulsing energy growing more erratic by the second. "We're losing containment," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of warning signals. Kraz stumbled to her side, still weak from his injury, but determined. "The auxiliary systems," he gasped, leaning heavily on the console. "There's a Tellarite failsafe. We can reroute power through the secondary grid." Indus nodded, her hands a blur as she implemented Kraz's suggestion. The facility shuddered around them, the very air seeming to vibrate with the core's unstable energy. Across the room, Philip struggled with Vex. The Tellarite's strength, fueled by desperation, was formidable even against Philip's enhanced physique. Vex landed a solid blow to Philip's ribs, causing him to stumble back. "You can't stop this," Vex snarled, lunging for a nearby control panel. Philip recovered quickly, intercepting Vex mid-lunge. He grappled the Tellarite from behind, using his superior leverage to pull him away from the controls. "Indus," he called out, straining to hold Vex back. "How much longer?" "Almost there," Indus replied, her voice tense with concentration. "Kraz, I need the override codes for the tertiary systems." Kraz rattled off a series of complex alphanumeric sequences, which Indus input with lightning speed. The core's pulsing energy began to stabilize, its angry red glow fading to a more manageable orange. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. A support beam, weakened by the facility's convulsions, gave way. It plummeted towards Indus, who remained fixated on her task, unaware of the danger. "Indus!" Philip shouted. Without hesitation, he released Vex and lunged towards her. Time seemed to slow as he crossed the distance, his enhanced speed pushing him to the limits of human capability. He reached Indus just as the beam fell, shoving her clear with one hand while raising his other arm in a futile attempt to ward off the falling debris. The beam struck him with bone-crushing force, pinning him to the ground. Indus scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Philip!" she cried, rushing to his side. Kraz, seeing Philip's sacrifice, felt something shift within him. Despite his injury, he moved with renewed purpose, placing himself between his fallen comrades and the advancing Vex. "Enough, Vex," Kraz said, his voice firm despite his weakened state. "This ends now." Vex, his eyes wild with fury, charged at Kraz. "Traitor!" he roared, swinging a piece of broken machinery like a club. Kraz stood his ground, taking the full brunt of Vex's attack. He staggered but remained upright, using his body to shield Philip and Indus. The sound of running footsteps filled the corridor outside. The remaining Tellarites who had followed Vex, drawn by the commotion, burst into the chamber. They stopped short, taking in the scene before them. Indus knelt beside the injured Philip, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she assessed his condition. Kraz stood protectively over them both, facing down Vex despite his own wounds. And at the center of it all, the core pulsed with a steady, controlled rhythm. The facility's alarms finally silenced. The Tellarites exchanged glances, a mix of emotions playing across their faces. Slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. "What are you doing?" Vex demanded, whirling to face his followers. "Destroy them!" But the Tellarites remained still, their eyes fixed on the trio before them. They saw not enemies or traitors, but beings willing to sacrifice everything for each other and for the greater good. One of the Tellarites stepped forward, addressing Vex. "No more, Vex. We've seen enough destruction. These three have shown us a better way." Vex's face contorted with disbelief and anger. He raised his makeshift weapon, preparing to strike, but found himself surrounded by his former followers. With a howl of frustration, he dropped the club, his shoulders sagging in defeat. As the immediate danger passed, medical teams rushed into the chamber. They quickly assessed the situation, moving to treat the injured. Philip was carefully extracted from beneath the fallen beam, his enhanced physiology having protected him from the worst of the damage. Indus refused to leave Philip's side as the medics worked, her hand clasped tightly in his. Kraz, despite his own injuries, insisted on overseeing the final stabilization of the core before allowing himself to be examined. As they were transported to the medical bay, Philip, Indus, and Kraz exchanged looks of profound understanding. Their shared ordeal had forged a bond deeper than any of them had anticipated. In those quiet moments, surrounded by the bustle of medical activity, they silently acknowledged the strength of their connection and the potential it held for the future. The news of their actions spread quickly through the facility and beyond. Humans and Tellarites alike marveled at the bravery and unity displayed by the unlikely trio. As they recovered in the medical bay, Philip, Indus, and Kraz began to realize that their relationship had become something more than a diplomatic arrangement, or even a close friendship. It had evolved into a unique and powerful bond that transcended species and cultural boundaries. In the days that followed, as they recuperated and the facility slowly returned to normal operations, the three found themselves spending every available moment together. They shared quiet conversations, reliving their experiences, and exploring the depths of their newfound connection. It became increasingly clear that their bond was not just a symbol of interspecies cooperation, but a deeply personal and intimate relationship that defied conventional categorization. As they prepared to face the aftermath of the attack and the challenges that lay ahead, Philip, Indus, and Kraz knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Their unconventional union had not only saved the research facility, but had also opened up new possibilities for understanding and collaboration between their species. The true test of their relationship and its impact on human-Tellarite relations was yet to come, but as they stood united, ready to address the gathered officials and media, there was a sense of hope and anticipation in the air. The story of their unique bond and its role in averting disaster was about to be shared with the wider world, potentially changing the course of interspecies relations forever.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.